to welcome tonight's speaker, Sarah I. from Philadelphia, Pennsylvania. Sarah, thank you for joining us, and I'll hand it over to you.
Hi, thank you, Andy. Hi, everyone. I'm Sarah. I'm an alcoholic. I want to start out by thanking Anthony for asking me to take this commitment tonight. It's really exciting to be a part of this new idea he has, and especially it warms my heart to be able to carry a message at a beginner's meeting, because for me that there's two people I find to be the most, and I've been both of these people in the rooms of Alcoholics Anonymous, the people first coming in on their way into Alcoholics Anonymous, and the people on their way out, no matter how much time we have. And to carry this message to anyone who is struggling from this physical, mental, and spiritual disease, and to hope to be able to share some hope with someone, because I am truly a hopeless variety alcoholic, a true alcoholic, real alcoholic with a hopeless variety. And yet I have found a solution that works for me. I have found a solution that seems to have worked for countless people that I know. And so I always get excited when I'm able to share about this. I'm sorry, this Zoom screen, I'm just trying to get it. Anyway, so, again, thank you for having me. And, it's been a really weird time, and I'm sure it's a weird time for all of us. There's a lot of isolation going on. And for me, I've been experiencing a lot of internal discomfort. And, this is not having anything to do with, just coming in. But I do know that the first feeling I experienced when I got sober was being uncomfortable in my sober skin. And what I didn't know for a very, very long period of time, that alcohol wasn't my problem, that being sober was my problem, that sobriety was my problem. And so if you're sitting in this meeting tonight and you're feeling uncomfortable in your skin and you don't know how to breathe your next breath and you have no idea how you're going to make it through the next 24 hours and without picking up, I get it, and welcome. And if you're sitting here in this meeting tonight and you're not even sure you have a desire to stop, the only thing you want is a desire for the consequences to stop. I relate with that as well. I came in and out of the rooms of Alcoholics Anonymous for many years, not knowing what I was seeking. I know I wanted to stop burning my life to the ground. I know I wanted to stop losing relationships with people I loved. I wanted to stop losing jobs. I wanted my kids back in my life. It was all about what I wanted, the stuff, the external stuff that I wanted. And what I really didn't want to do was stop drinking, because it was my solution, because it did something for me that nothing in my life had ever done for me. Like, from my earliest memory, I remember being uncomfortable in my skin, and I couldn't put a finger on what it was. I just remember feeling different and less than and separate from everybody around me. And I couldn't figure out why everybody else felt okay and I didn't. I mean, I would look around the world and be like, how can you interact with people? How can you talk to people? How can you go to school and get friends and all these other things? And I just can't seem to do that. But part of what I suffer from as an alcoholic is this misperception of reality. This is a disease of perception. And it's interesting how I see my childhood, or how I saw my childhood coming into the rooms of Alcoholics Anonymous, is not the truth of what my childhood really was. I came in the rooms of AA with this sob story about how hard I had it, how nobody liked me, how I had no friends, how my mom was a terrible person, going on and on and on about what a victim I was, that I wasn't loved. And that simply isn't the truth. If I'm telling you what it was like, what it was like is I had good parents. I had good parents. They're still married today, 50 some odd years later, 6 brothers and sisters. I always had everything I needed, not necessarily everything I wanted. And apparently, according to my mother, and in a very revealing conversation I had with her over the summer, I had a lot of friends when I was little. But I didn't see it that way. I just saw it as nobody wanted to be around me. I didn't see the same thing other people saw. And I still can suffer from that in my sober skin at 8.5 years sober. I don't see reality as it is. And what alcohol does for me is it shifts my perception of reality. And it makes what is intolerable for me internally tolerable for the first time in my life. So what happened to me when I was younger is I'm experiencing this internal condition, and I don't know what it is, and I don't know what it is that I have that there's something wrong or different than me, and that I have this misperception of reality. And I experienced a horrific trauma at the age of 15 at the hands of 3 men. And I stand by the fact that I had these loving, amazing parents, but my mom's reaction to this trauma was not great. It wasn't appropriate. It wasn't loving. It wasn't. She essentially looked at me in the hospital bed and said, "How could you do this? How could you let this happen to you?" And so I'm already uncomfortable in my skin, and then I experienced this trauma, and then I experienced like what I felt to be the rejection and abandonment of the one person I believe was supposed to protect me more than anyone else in the world. And I wanted to die. It was so unbearable breathing. just existing at that point. And you know, I can't say that before that happened that I hadn't had a drink, but I can say that it was after I experienced that trauma that I realized the effect that alcohol could produce for me. And it's exactly as the big book describes it. You know, that sense of ease and comfort that comes at once with taking, you know, even a glass, one or two drinks. Like it's just, it's the warmth that comes over me that makes it okay. And for the first time in my life, I feel like I can talk to people. I feel like that anger and hatred and rage goes away, and then I'm okay. And that well, as long as my solution is in my body, I feel like I can breathe, and I don't want to blow my brains out. So alcohol at that point in my life actually saved my life. I was able to function because of alcohol. So it worked for me, and I wasn't experiencing these external consequences early on. So like there was no reason for me to stop. I had no desire to stop. And early on, I experienced that physical allergy the book talks about. I was always one demands the second, demands the third. And I don't know if you can relate to that, but I don't really relate to people who can have just one of anything. It's just not my story. I don't relate to my sister who can go out and have a glass of wine with dinner and drink half of it and get tired and want to go home and go to bed. Like it's never, I didn't understand like it was always about the effect, always about the effect. Like my dad loves to sip and appreciate scotch and like swirl it around in his mouth. I'm the type of alcoholic who will hold my nose and slam that shit down. So it produces an effect. Like I want the effect now and I want it quickly and I don't care. I'm not about appreciating taste. You know, and later on, I would delude myself because I'd, you know, become a wine aficionado, even though the wine was $10 a bottle. Like I'm deluding myself, and others are attempting to by saying, oh, you know, no, it's just about appreciating the taste, when it really was always about the effect. And what I'm always doing when I'm younger and throughout my life is like I'm looking for an external solution to fix an internal condition, and I have no idea that I'm even doing that. And that comes in many forms. The biggest form it comes in is a substance, alcohol or drugs. The other form it comes in is another human power, relationships, job. Let me have some babies. Let me bring them into the world, because the delusion I have is that if my life looks a certain way on the outside, then I'll be just like everybody else. You know, if I just have the right job or the right number of children or the right marriage, I'll be just like you and I'll feel okay in my skin. And that's just not the truth. I got married young. I got pregnant young. Actually, I got pregnant young, then married young. I have to get my orders right. I only married the guy because, you know, my parents said it was a good idea. And I thought he would pay all my bills and take care of me and I wouldn't have to work. Like that's how I look at all relationships in my life. What can you do for me, including having children? I didn't become a mother until I had an experience with the 12 steps of Alcoholics Anonymous. I had babies, but I wasn't a mother. I brought children into this world for what they could do for me, not what I could do for them. So I have this daughter, and I'm in this marriage that I don't want to be in, and eventually that gets old, and I get rid of him after 10 months, and I have full custody of my daughter. And you know, another delusion that I have, and I'll keep it in the bottle because this is Alcoholics Anonymous and I respect our traditions, but I'm telling you, I will treat my alcoholism with anything I can find. And if a doctor tells me that it comes in a prescription for him, that just makes it even more okay. It's legal, it's appropriate, it's acceptable. And I can effectively drink around the clock, and it doesn't matter if I'm going to 10 different doctors or if you tell me to take one, I take 5. It doesn't. None of that matters. My head is telling me this is fine, this is normal, this is how everybody is, and this is just what I need to feel normal. That was another thing, and that was my truth. Like I needed to have this stuff in my system to feel just like other people, and for 3 years, I tried to be a mother to my daughter, and eventually my external circumstances like got unmanageable, as they do when we're not sober, and I couldn't provide for my daughter, and so I went to my ex-husband to try to extort more money from him, and he cut me off. He said no, and he took primary physical custody of our child, and of course, what do? I scream, I yell, "How dare you? She's mine! I gave birth to her." And tried to run him over in the parking lot of the courthouse, like when he got awarded custody. Like I was insane. But if I were to tell you the truth, which I was not capable of telling myself or anybody else at the time, I didn't even know this truth until I had an experience with the 12 steps, was that I was relieved. I was relieved that he won custody. My ego wanted to say, oh, you can't take my daughter. Like, what does that say about me? But I didn't want to be responsible for a 3-year-old. You can't take a 3-year-old to the bar. And when I didn't have to be responsible for her, I could drink exactly how I wanted to. And so alcohol starts to become my master. I moved to Manhattan because bars stay open until 5 a.m. I work in the restaurant and bar industry because I can go to work loaded and nobody calls me out on it. Nobody cares. And if they start to care, I just move on to the next one. And all my relationships were centered around alcohol and substances. And if somebody didn't drink the way I drank, or provide me with the means that I needed to drink, and if they dared to call me out on my drinking, I left and I moved on to the next one. It was all about what I needed. And again, I seek solutions outside of myself. So when I'm 27 years old, I really believe I found my next solution, and the love of my life in the bar. Eyes lock across a crowded room, and we go home together that night. 2 weeks later, we sign a lease, because that's perfectly normal in my world. And then a month after that, he pulls out a 2-carat diamond ring set in platinum, and I'm like, this is it. I must be worth something. Someone's willing to put expensive jewelry on me. This must mean something. Here's the problem. I'd never told this man one true fact about my life. He didn't really know who I was. I didn't know who the hell I was. And he certainly didn't know that I hadn't breathed a sober breath from day one. And he certainly didn't know that 6 months later when we stood on the beach in Jamaica and said our vows without my parents having even met this man. And, and then 6 months later when I get pregnant with this man's child, he doesn't know that I'm still not sober and that I can't stay sober. See, early on, and this is a disease of progression. Our book talks about that. It talks about how our disease progresses. Early on, maybe I started out as a moderate or hard drinker, probably a hard drinker. I don't think I was ever really moderate. But if I had a sufficient reason, if somebody told me something bad was going to happen to me and I needed to stop, I could stop early on. And the one time I was able to do that was when I was pregnant with my daughter when I was 19 years old. And for those 9 months, I was white knuckling it that whole pregnancy. I was able to not drink. I didn't even smoke cigarettes. I was a good girl. And what separates me from normal people like my sisters is for those 9 months, all I can think about is I gotta get this kid out of me. I can't wait to have a baby. So and not because I want to look at her and I want to see how beautiful she is. No, I want to drink. I want relief, and that's exactly what I did. And by the time we're talking 7 years later, I'm pregnant with my with this child. I can't stop, and I don't want to. The idea of being separated from my solution is unbearable to me. And I start to have problems in this pregnancy early on, and I go to the hospital and I start to have complications, and they gave me the wrong medication, and it ended the pregnancy in a very ugly way, and I had to have surgery. And I remember coming home from the hospital and sitting in the living room, and my husband at the time, he's so angry because the husband acknowledged this, and the hospital acknowledged the mistake, and he's like, I'm going to sue this doctor, I'm going to sue this hospital. And I just remember being crippled with fear, absolutely crippled with fear. He's going to leave. I'm going to lose my little family. I can't have that happen. This man wants a baby. What am I going to do? I have to fix this. What am I going to do to fix this? And the only thing that my insane brain could come up with is I'll get pregnant again. And that's what I did. 5 weeks after this horrific miscarriage caused by this hospital mistake, I'm pregnant again. And something inside me just breaks. And I don't want this child anymore. I don't want to live the life I'm living anymore. I don't want to live any life anymore. I can't breathe a sober breath. I stopped eating. All the lies I've been keeping from this man that I married all start to get exposed. I'm a danger to myself and the child that I'm carrying. And just no connection to this baby. It's all about me and getting relief, and I need relief. And it's a direct result of everything I did during that pregnancy. My son is born 3 months premature, and he's 2 pounds. And the first time I lay eyes on him, he's in the NICU and he can't breathe on his own. And he's fed by tubes, and he can't be held. And I looked at him and I fell in love with this little boy, and I knew he was my son. And I was able to love him as much as I was able to love any human being at that period of my life. I loved that boy. But the problem is that I knew in my heart I put him there. I knew the reason he couldn't breathe was because of me. I knew the reason he couldn't be held was because of me, and the shame and the guilt that was so overwhelming. I knew the one thing that I needed, and the only solution that I had in my life that would shut that head up, that head that I woke up with every morning for decades that annihilated me. You're a piece of shit. You should just kill yourself. You don't deserve to live. That head, it just got louder and it got louder. And the problem with the disease of progression is that alcohol, the effect produced by alcohol, it isn't as effective as time passes. The head gets louder, and I need more and more alcohol and more of it on a more consistent basis. And I can't stop. And it says in our big book that many of us had moral and philosophical convictions galore, but we could not live up to them even though we wanted to. And the truth was, there was somewhere deep inside of me where I wanted to be a good mother. I wanted to be a good wife, and I wanted to be a good daughter. And like all that shame I had inside me shows me I'm not a fucking sociopath. Like I have feelings. Like I felt things deeply. I was so full of shame and guilt. The problem is I didn't have the needed power to stop. Like I'm the type of mother who nods out and drops her kid on the floor or leaves my kid in the car on a hot day to go get a drink. That's the kind of mother I am. I don't have the power to be different. I just don't. And I'm the kind of mother that when my son is 8 months old, my husband gets a call from the police station saying, "We need you to come pick up your child because we're locking your wife up." And I get bailed out and come home 24 hours later, and I'm sick and I'm scared. And I walk into the living room, and my husband has everything packed and he's going to leave, and he has our child and he's ready to go. And I try everything, like every manipulative tactic I could think of. I'm sick. You said in sickness and in health. And this man looks at me and he says, I'll stay with you, but we're packing up this apartment. We're moving in with my parents, and you're going to treatment and you're getting sober today. And I looked at that man, and I looked at who I loved as much as I was able to, and I looked at my son, knowing he was going to walk out the door with my child. And I said no. I said no. Because at that time, the idea of losing my solution was so much more terrifying than losing my own child. And the problem with that is, for years and years and years, I drank over that. Like I kept drinking over the shame and guilt over that because I thought I had a choice. I thought I had a choice in that moment to choose my child. And for years and years, I had people say that to me, like, why can't you just stop for your kids? Why can't you just stop? And I didn't know until I finally sat down with a woman in AA who explained to me that for reasons yet obscure, most alcoholics have lost that power of choice. That what I think I have this brain that will tell me I'll fix it later. They'll come back. I'll figure this out later. But right now in this moment, I need relief. And that's the most important thing, more important even than keeping my baby. And after they left, like the pain was so overwhelming, and I realized they weren't coming back, and I wasn't able to manipulate my way out of this. So I just go deeper and deeper and deeper into this pit, and I just drink around the clock, and I stop eating, and I get sicker and I get sicker. And this goes on for almost 2 months, and until my mom has a gut feeling that something's wrong with her daughter, and she gets in her car and she drives 2 hours, and she finds me at 75 pounds with a fever of 106, riddled with infection. And she takes me to the hospital where I've got a heart infection, multiple blood infections, and I'm dying. And they tell my mother, like, your daughter's going to die. We're going to make her comfortable, but you need to say goodbye. You need to have your family members come in. And like, all I'm doing with this woman who's standing at my bedside, who's doing nothing but trying to be helpful, is I'm screaming at her and I'm cursing at her. I'm like, how dare you? Why didn't you just let me die? Why didn't you just let me die? Because this is the level of the selfishness and self-centeredness that I suffer from. It doesn't matter that I'm asking a mother to bury her child. It doesn't matter that I'm going to leave 2 children without a mother. It doesn't matter that I'm abandoning every person I love. I just want my pain to stop because I don't care about anybody else. It's always been about me. And that, I survived that, but it landed in the ICU for a month in a skilled nursing facility, which is like a nursing home for 5 months, because I can't walk and I can't stop drinking even in there, and I don't want to. And I get out of there, and this is what my life looks like for many years, like in and out of treatment facilities, in and out of detoxes, in and out of rehabs, in and out of prison cells, just doing the same thing over and over again, like the insanity, the jaywalker kind of mentality, like not changing anything. Like I repeat the same thing. Like I go to detox and I meet the love of my life in group, and then we sign out AMA together, and move into his parents' basement with our trash bags. And what I keep experiencing is this, like I keep getting separated from alcohol over and over and over again. I get separated from alcohol. And so this is the longest time. I think the problem, if you just remove the problem, which I believe at the time to be alcohol and other substances, is that I'll be okay. And the problem is all evidence proves opposite. Like law enforcement is a really effective way of separating me from alcohol. When I'm incarcerated, I'm as sober as I'm ever going to be. And then they let me out. And while I'm separated, like I do everything the book talks about. I swear it off. And I'm like, when you get out of here, I'm going to be a good mom. I'm going to get my kids back. I'm going to do all these things. And every single time, like I do the same thing. I come out with all these grand ideas. I'm in and out of my children's lives for years, like a tornado, pop in and like, hey, I'm sober again this week. and then disappearing again. And it took me several years to this point after that hospitalization to end up in the rooms of Alcoholics Anonymous. And by this time, my son's 6 years old. He's being raised by another woman who he calls mom. And I'm convinced in my delusional head that this woman stole my child from me. Not that I abandoned him, that she stole him. And I loathe her. I hate the woman who does everything that I'm incapable of doing, like feeding him and taking care of him and clothing him and taking him to school. Hate her. And I didn't end up in the rooms of Alcoholics Anonymous because I wanted to be here, because I wanted to stop drinking. No, none of those reasons. I got paroled here. I got sent to a halfway house where I had to get a paper signed 5 days a week, and I picked a convenient location with cute boys, and I came to AA, and I dated the men, and I drank the coffee, and I did no work, and I didn't tell the truth, and I raised my hand, and I told you about my day, and I dressed up the outside. I got a job at a diner, flirted with a bunch of dirty old men, wadded up cash in my sock drawer, didn't pay back a dime, didn't make a single amends, popped back in my kids' lives because I dress up the outside really well. Of course, I got a couple boyfriends, and I'm getting this stuff, and I'm starting to think I'm okay. The delusion comes back. The ego gets fed. The ego thinks like, okay, Sarah, you're okay. Like, look, somebody's letting you see your kids. I mean, they have to stand by and watch you, but you must be doing better. And I get out after 90 days, and I move into this apartment, and I think I'm cool. I don't need AA meetings anymore. I'm done. Cured. And a month into this, I'm at my daughter's lacrosse game. And my 6-year-old son looks at me and he says, you're not my real mom. Kim's my real mom because she takes care of me every day, and you just gave birth to me. And it felt like somebody stabbed me in the heart with a knife. And I had no solution in my life, not a spiritual one, not a chemical one. And there was something I knew in an instant that would remove everything, that would take that pain away. And I knew exactly what would do that. And that was alcohol. And that's exactly what I did. I ran and I had one drink, and what happened was 18 months after that, I'm still drinking and I can't stop. And it didn't matter that there were warrants out for my arrest, that there were eviction notices taped to my door. It didn't matter that in a few days I had a custody hearing coming up for my son where I could potentially lose all rights to my child. And that all I needed to do was produce a clean urine, and I couldn't do it. It describes that in the doctor's opinion. Like we may have, an important date coming up that is supposed to go favorably to us, but I take a day or two prior to that event, and I can't. Alcohol becomes more important than anything else in my life, and that's what happened. And I don't stop for 18 months until law enforcement steps in and separates me again. And what do? Exact same thing. Repeat the same cycle. Go to a recovery house, get a sponsor in name only. Don't do any work. I meet another solution who lives at another recovery house who's an aspiring rap artist, and we move in together in like 2 weeks, and we're drinking together within a week or two and lying to each other and stealing from each other, and it's completely unmanageable, and everything goes really dark. And thank God it got really dark, because there was something different about that. That was my last run, and it was the most painful, horrible thing I'd ever experienced in my life up until that point. And all my other runs, I lost everything externally, and I experienced all these horrific consequences. But Bill Wilson talks about that in his story. Like, the mind is a marvelous mechanism, and there are a lot of external consequences that I can suffer without it bringing me to my knees. Like the abnormal becomes normal, and I come to tolerate these situations that normal people would not be able to tolerate. I can deal with that, but it was when the internal got really bad. That's when it crushed me. Like the end of my other runs, I had nothing left, maybe a backpack, that's of clothes, and that's it. But this, I had a roof over my head, I had money in my pocket, I had a car, and I wanted to die. And all of our external consequences are going to look different. If you're sitting in this meeting tonight thinking, well, I'm not an 11-time felon like this woman, and I didn't have children that I lost, I didn't lose marriages, it doesn't mean you're not alcoholic. What happened to me, where I really knew true powerlessness, was is that last night that I was out there when I'm commando crawling across the floor and grabbing those car keys, because the power of alcohol pulling me out the door at 2 or 3 in the morning was so overwhelming. And then when I got in that car, and then for the first time in my entire life, I realized that I didn't want to do this anymore, that I wanted to stop what I was doing. And I'm driving in my car on the highway to go get a drink. And everything in my body, I had the most overwhelming, overpowering desire to turn my car around and go home. And I couldn't turn my car around. I couldn't. That's alcoholism. That's the alcoholism, when everything in me wants to stop, and I'm drinking against my will. When I have the desire, when that desire finally shows up, I can't physically stop. And that's when I screamed out to this power, this God that we all talk about in AA. And I didn't know, like, I'm brought up in this house where God is like the center of the household. Like, I had these very strict religious parents. Father's a Presbyterian minister. You know, we were that family that prayed in public. And I always had these ideas and conceptions of God that there was like this Santa Claus, like, do for me, do my will for me. And you know, so I would pray in these clutch moments, like, you know, get me out of jail, or make the judge in a good mood, or get me well, or whatever, give me some money, fix this relationship. But I didn't understand a conception of a power that could potentially save my life. And I don't even think I ever really believed in this power. I mean, listen, I would go to church and feel this sense of like, I'm going to burn in hell because of all the terrible things that I've done. So I couldn't connect with this power. But that night, something had me screaming out to this power I wasn't even sure existed. And my prayer was simply this. It was, dear God, please fucking kill me or stop me, please. Begging over and over again, pounding on the steering wheel, begging God to kill me or stop me because I couldn't take it anymore. I'd rather be dead. And our book refers to that as the jumping off point where I can't live with it and I can't live without it anymore. And 12 hours later, I had handcuffs back on me. And I don't know what God is or isn't, but I know there was a power at work that night greater than myself that stopped me, that intervened. And, you know, it wasn't a short journey because, like, I thought, you know, up until this point, I have 11 felonies and I get locked up on this like little retail theft. So I'm thinking, all right, I'll go and I'll get a slap on the wrist and get let out and, you know, dry out while I'm incarcerated and I'll feel better. But that's not what, you know, do a couple weeks, but that's not what happened. You know, I stood in front of a judge who said, Miss Ironside, I'm sentencing you to 1 to 3 years to the state correctional facility. And I went to state prison. And, you know, if I need empirical evidence that what I suffer from does not come in a bottle, it was my period of time, the 18 months while I was incarcerated, without a chemical or spiritual solution in my life. And of course, I see it in hindsight, like I do everything in my life. That for 18 months, the monster I became, the selfishness and self-centeredness that I ran on, and you know, I was doing this from behind the walls of a prison cell. Like, I would call home on my parents' dime and tell them, like, on the phone account that they had paid for, and tell them what they needed to do for me. And I would write these 4 or 5 page long apology letters home about how sorry I was, but maybe if you were better parents or better siblings, I wouldn't be here. And P.S., I need money, send it. And after 18 months of this monstrous behavior, I get out and I have all these ideas. Like, that's how insane. Like, I had this moment of absolute brokenness, and God removes that. Like, God removes the substance, but He doesn't remove the problem. That's the work that I need to do. That's the work the 12 steps are aligned to do. The substance gets removed. The problem shows up. And I didn't know that. The ego's right back. And I get out of, you know, after 18 months and I'm full of ideas about how I'm going to manage my life. And within a week, God smashes every single idea I have for how I'm going to run my life. And thank God. And I'm left in this broken place all over again in the fetal position, curled up like on the floor of this recovery house, screaming out to this God all over again and asking for answers because I don't know what's wrong with me. And then God shows up, and I saw God for the first time in the eyes of another woman in Alcoholics Anonymous and other men in Alcoholics Anonymous. I walked up the steps of the Greater Northeast Group of Alcoholics Anonymous, which used to be my home group, and something happened that I had never experienced before, because I had seen people in AA for years who were happy and joyous and free, and I just thought they were insane or they were liars or they didn't experience what I experienced. But these people I saw, I knew them, I drank with them. Some of them were homeless, living on the streets of Philadelphia, and these people were sober and they were lit up, and they were walking around with this blue book and they were talking about God and they were helping people and they were sober. And I asked a woman to help me because I didn't have a single idea left. And thank God. Brokenness for me is the most beautiful place in the world to be, because when Sarah runs out of ideas, that's where God can enter in. And I can experience that just as much now, like as I did it, you know, at the beginning of my journey. As soon as Sarah has ideas about how to run her life, everything gets ugly again. And, you know, I had this experience going through the 12 steps that was in no way comfortable, and more the educational variety alcoholic, where everything was painful and awkward, like kneeling on the floor of a recovery house and, you know, saying this prayer with this woman, like holding her hand, flashbacks of my childhood. I'm super embarrassed. And why are these girls screaming behind us about who stole their cigarettes? And what does this have to do with God? I don't even know what these words mean. And I didn't even know at the moment that I simply made a decision in my third step to continue on with the rest of the steps. That's all I did. Like, I got up from that prayer, and after saying these words, and this woman slides this paper in front of me, and she starts telling me to write, and I start writing, and it tells us right there in our book, you know, although this decision, the third step decision, is a vital and crucial step. It could have little permanent effect unless at once followed by a strenuous effort to face and be rid of the things that are blocking us. And this woman kind of tricks me. She tells me I get to write about all the people that I'm angry at. And so I write and I write, and I have this 27-page, saga of like what a victim Sarah is. And I go into this fifth step thinking I'm going to be able to tell her what a victim I am. And what happens is, for like 4.5 hours, this woman proceeds to tell me every decision based on self and fear that I had made that had placed me in a position to be heard. And what happens in this fifth step is not that this woman beat me down, and she didn't belittle me. In fact, she shared a lot of her own story with me. And I didn't walk out of this experience feeling lighter than air or any of the, I didn't. Well, the book has beautiful promises about that. You could look the world in the eye, all of this stuff. I didn't feel that immediately. I felt worse, because what happened in this fifth step is that misperception of reality that I had my whole life started to shift into this place of truth, and I didn't know how to deal with that. Like, for instance, my mother, she got a page to herself, first page. It's all her fault. My mom, what's the cause? Like, these men hurt me, and she blamed me. And we move our way down these columns. What did this affect? And resolutely look for my mistakes. Where was I selfish, self-seeking, dishonest, and frightened? And all of what came out of this conversation was not only all the harm that I caused this woman, and was tremendous amount of harm that I caused her. But what really came out of this is that I took this one decision that my mother made based on her own fear, and I allowed it to blind me to every beautiful, wonderful thing my mother did for me my entire life. Every time she showed up in rehabs and detoxes with fresh clothes, paid my bail, visited me in these dark places, and invited me to family dinners where nobody wanted me. That's who my mother is. But I don't see that because I'm so blinded by me. And I start to see the truth, and I start to see who I really am. And I'm so broken, and I kept going, and thank God I kept going. And it wasn't until, I saw God in you guys in my second step, but it wasn't until I got to my ninth step where I felt God in me. And that's where everything shifted. And honestly, like, I had my immense experience, when I first started going through my steps, which was life altering. For the first time in my life, I sat in front of the people that I harmed, the people who took the direct hits. And instead of saying I was sorry and making a bunch of excuses, I owned it, and I showed up, and I did what I could to restore that relationship, to restore, to amend the things that I had broken. And, we get these amazing promises that we, hear all the time in meetings. We're going to know a new freedom and a new happiness. All of these promises that I will tell you, provided I stay in this work, they are a living, breathing thing in my life, and they absolutely are very real. But what the true purpose I found of the immense process, and what it says in our literature, is that the immense process is to fit ourselves to be of maximum service to God and the people around us. And so what does that look like? What it looks like is that I was able to make an amends to my mother, a true amends. And when I asked her if there was anything I could do to make it right, my mother said, I need you to be a living example of recovery for your brother, my brother who still suffers from this disease. Meaning, for the rest of my life until the day that I die, I need to walk this path. I need to be a living, breathing big book for my brother and not hit him over the head with that. And like, that's no easy task, believe me, and I fall short all the time. But it allows me to be of maximum service to not just my brother, but every single member of my family when I practice these principles. And, it allowed me to go to my sister, who I had tremendous problems with my whole life. We could never get along, and we always butted heads. But when I went to my sister and made my amends, our book talks about sometimes feuds of long standing fall away in an hour. And that's what happened. And my sister was in a really dark, dark place at that time in her life. And it's interesting. I was just talking to somebody before I came here, because I'm going through my ninth step again. And I've made some really very difficult amends this week that I didn't think I would be able to make, to be honest with you. But, you know, somebody said something about, because a lot of people aren't willing to meet up in the middle of COVID and do a direct, face to face. The book says direct. It doesn't say face to face. And, I believe God gives us all sorts of resources. And when my sister, I had to make an amends to my sister over the phone because she was extremely ill at the time. And thank God I did that. Thank God. Thank God nobody told me, because I was on state parole and I couldn't leave the county. And she was living in Western Pennsylvania, and she was bedridden and she couldn't travel. And I'm really grateful for a woman who directed me to do things this way and to go with my heart. And we had this conversation, and within minutes, my sister's admitting her wrongs to me. And for what came out of that was the most beautiful relationship I'd ever had with my sister or any of my siblings at that point in my life. See, my sister was severely anorexic, and she was living in this place of shame and fear that I had lived 90% of my life. And she felt so alone. And the things she was doing to her body, she couldn't tell another living soul, but she could tell them to me because she knew I understood. What AA gave me, what the amends process gave me, is what it gave me the ability to be a friend to my sister when she didn't feel like she had a friend in the world. It gave her somebody to talk to and tell things she couldn't tell her husband. She couldn't tell my parents. She couldn't tell her own children. And it gave me a year and a half of the best friendship I ever had with her, until my mom called me up at 5:30 in the morning in 2015 and told me my sister was dead. And here's where the promises of the ninth step show up. We intuitively know how to handle situations which used to baffle us. I intuitively knew that this had nothing to do with me, that I needed to show up and help my parents bury their daughter, to help her children bury their mom. And then, God gives me this gift. And I didn't see it as a gift at the time, God put me in the room with my mom at the precise moment she saw Amy, my sister, in the casket for the first time, and allowed me to be there to comfort my mother in that moment. And I'm telling you, without God and without the 12 steps and without the amends process, without you guys, there's no way that would happen. Because on my power, I'm in the bathroom getting loaded. I'm in a prison cell, in a rehab, and anywhere but in that moment. Talk about being of maximum service to God and the people around us, meaning putting my own pain aside to be there for the one person I probably harm more than anybody on this earth, and make it about her exactly, and exactly how it should be, and restoring that. And I always thought about this spirituality as being like, something you sought on a yoga mat, or like maybe I said, take a retreat or something. And they're all amazing things. They're all part of my 11th step. I do meditation. I do all kinds of cool stuff outside of the book, because, our big book's just the beginning. But for me, the real spirituality comes from that pain and that, and, what I experienced with my sister's death was like, being in the most painful thing I'd ever experienced in my entire life, but somehow knowing that everything was going to be okay, and being at peace and being in the moment. And God did that, not me. God did that. And my life over the past few years has not been perfect by any stretch of the imagination. And I'm going to share this openly because this is important. I need to share about the fact that what happens in AA is that we do not get rendered white as snow. Our lives do not become perfect. And we don't always handle things gracefully, and we don't always make the best decisions. But when we stay centered in this program and we keep our feet moving, and we practice these principles to the best of our ability, we somehow manage to make it to the other side of it. And not pick up a drink. And that's the miracle of it. I've been sponsoring women since I completed my steps after a month, right? And my feet have not stopped moving. And it tells us right there in our big book that nothing so much ensures immunity from the next drink as intensive work with other alcoholics. And I'm here to attest to that. That is absolutely true. And that even in the most painful experiences of my life, horrible breakups, horrible, I just experienced horrific trauma at the hands of another human being, and, severe betrayal in a relationship that I stayed in far too long out of fear. But my feet never stop moving. They don't stop moving. And I'm always in the center of Alcoholics Anonymous. And I'll tell you what happens in these experiences. I've had 2 long-term relationships sober. They were both awful. One of them couldn't stay away from a drink. The other one couldn't stay away from other women. And that's the story. Those have been my two relationships. And what did I do? And I want to sit there and I don't want to play victim and I want to blame them. These are sick people who lack the power and they suffer from a disease, a spiritual disease, just like my own. And what happens is I have to continue to look for where I'm at fault, where I'm to blame, right? And that's a hard thing to do. And when COVID hit, I was really uncomfortable, and everything external was being stripped from me. I'm a runner. I got injured, couldn't run anymore. Like all this external stuff that I relied upon, that I believed was, bringing positive things to my life. This relationship was off and on, and it was starting to get really bad. And I reached out to my sponsor, and I said, I think I need to do another inventory, because of course I know how to treat myself, right? And she said, well, I'm going through the steps I've just gone through my steps in this new way. And I think we should do this together. And so I start going through these steps and I start to have this experience, and I write the most ridiculously long inventory I've ever written in my entire life, most intensive thing. And it took me like months to finish and go through with her. And I'm thinking I'm going to have this white light experience and this shift of perception. And guess what? The weird thing is that's not what happened. Like I knew all this stuff already. I knew I was running on fear. I knew there were these brokenness, and there's still this brokenness in me, this trauma, this codependency, these fear issues that I have, right? And the areas of my life where I become agnostic, where I don't let God in. God, I will turn my will and my life over to you, right? But not him, not this situation. You can have my alcoholism or my belief. Just take alcohol from me, but I'll take care of everything else over here. And I start managing, and I see it. I already know it, yet I can't stop. I can't let go of this relationship. I can't let go. Until I think a couple of weeks ago, it got so bad that I ended up in the hospital. And I don't say this that I'm like running around. Like I need to share this because I need to tell the truth. I ended up in the hospital. I was with a dangerous human being and a very sick person, and I got broken spiritually and mentally and in every way. And what happened is I came out of the hospital and I was, of course, sunk into self-pity for a couple of days. But then what happened is like God used that pain and broke me wide open, and something miraculous happened. I was right there at my ninth step. And there was an individual who had been the other woman in the relationship for 2 years, who knew about me and I did not know about her. And when I found out, I behaved less than a woman of honor and dignity with the things that I said to her. And she was on my ninth step. And I was so broken by what happened that when I sat with my sponsor to go over this list, she said, I want you to start with this person. And I was absolutely willing. This is something for months and months and months. I knew it was going to come up, and I was like, I don't know if I can do this. And I'd been praying, but it was in that moment I knew. And I set up the appointment, and I had this conversation with this woman. And I've never experienced anything like, it was, I spoke to myself. This woman had the same fears and the same, when I asked her if she needed to share with me how I hurt her, and when she shared with me about her own self-worth and her own pain that she had been caused by the same individual. And actually that person's name never even entered the conversation. What I saw was another one of God's kids. And what I saw for the first time is I saw myself mirrored right back at me. And when I walked away, I called my sponsor sobbing, because I felt like this weight lifted off of me. Like I thought everything was going to shift when I did that inventory. It wasn't until I made that amends where everything fell. All of that heaviness that I'd been carrying just fell away. And I went on to make some other difficult amends surrounding that situation and others. And what's been happening is like, I haven't felt this light in years. Like I'm coming to know a new freedom and a new happiness. And it's happened over a course of days. And someone said to me, I'm sorry that you went through that with the relationship. And I'm like, I'm not. Because I don't listen to God when God's tapping me on the shoulder lightly. And I don't listen to God when maybe he's throwing rocks at me. I listen to God when I get run over by a freight train. And I'm like, okay, all right, I'll take my hands off of this. You've wrenched this away from me. And now I'm willing. And now I'll do whatever it takes. And then, so it's indescribable. And that's been the story of my sobriety is Sarah taking the reins back and burning my life into the ground and, running around AA trying to save everybody, but not practicing the 11 steps that come prior to 12, because that's another trap I fall into. Because it says, Nothing will so much ensure immunity as intensive work with other alcoholics. It works when all other methods fail, meaning I have to try the other methods as well. I can't just two-step it. And, and so what happens now is like I pick up the phone with joy in my heart, and service becomes a gift again. It doesn't become something I need to do to stay sober. It becomes like the bright spot in my life as it talks about frequent contact with newcomers. And what my life looks like today as a result of this work is like, listen, the external stuff is amazing. And it's that life beyond my wildest dreams. Like literally, like I had no dreams coming into AA. I'm like, listen, I'll marry a rich dude. I'll get an SSI check, but that's about it. I'm an 11-time felon who works in a corporate law firm with $1 million clients. I'm a notary public for the Commonwealth of Pennsylvania, sworn in the same courthouse where I was sentenced to state prison. I only share that because not that that's the stuff that's promised us in AA. In fact, nothing really material is promised us in AA, but the miracles, it talks in the book about, and the age of miracles is upon us. Like these things are miracles. You can't tell me there isn't a power greater than myself when events like that occur. You just can't, because I'm not capable of that. That's the credit score that I have today, direct result of me making financial amends. The car that's parked out in front of my house right now that I get to share with my best friend and 6 cats, all a direct result of doing what the big book tells me to do. Showing up for work, being a productive member of society, paying my bills, being honest, carrying myself with integrity. And this stuff's amazing, but it could be gone tomorrow. And what I really have is like this peace of mind, provided I'm doing the work as it's outlined, provided I'm willing to make those difficult amends, provided I'm willing to trust God, clean house, and help others. And I'm going to end with this. I have a son that I have not seen in 14 years, and there will never be a time that I do not share about this, because coming into AA, one of my biggest delusions was the solution is outside of me. That I need something outside of me to change in order for me to be okay inside, that I cannot get and stay sober if somebody I love dies. I cannot get and stay sober if this relationship does not work out, that I can't get and stay sober and even be okay if I don't get my children back. I reached out to my son's father and his wife when I started going through my steps via a letter. They are not interested. They are still not interested. My son isn't interested. I've been directed to send a card with no name on it, with cash in it once a month. I continue to do that, but they want no parts of me. And they, that is their right. And a couple years ago, I was in a lot of pain over this, and I didn't know what to do. And I'm really grateful that, people taught me early on that Alcoholics Anonymous is a program of God reliance, not human reliance. It doesn't tell me to go ask the opinions of 20 different people and pick whichever opinion suits me best. It says when I don't know what to do, I'm to ask God for an intuitive thought or decision. And I went to God and I'm just like, God, I don't know what to do. Please show me. I miss my son. I don't even know what he looks like. Please show me. Please help me. And I kept asking until God showed me. And one night, it was I think it's about over 3 years ago now, I was on Instagram and I typed in his name and I saw my son's face for the first time in a decade, and he's beautiful and he's loved and he has an amazing life. And I felt a sense of peace come over me that he's okay, and that I don't need to put my hands in this any further than I already have, that it's not up to me when this gets restored, how this gets restored. God restores things on his timeline, not mine. I'm responsible for the effort, not the outcome. And that kind of peace and that kind of acceptance cannot come from within me, because I am not a person built to accept things like that. Having those beliefs that I needed all those things to be okay and stay sober kept me blocked for so long. It kept me from being sober for so many years. But when it tells us in chapter 7 that let no alcoholic say they cannot fully recover unless they have their entire family back, I felt that in my heart when I heard that at 2 years sober, because I knew it to be the truth. That I knew that I had fully recovered from a hopeless state of mind and body, and I didn't have my son back. And honestly, I may never have my son back. But as long as my connection and reliance is on a power greater than myself, I will be okay. I will continue to live a life of purpose, a life of joy, and a life of freedom. I can't remember the last time I thought of thought of an obsession and went on an obsession, or like these things have been removed from me for a drink. And I don't know, like, I have a beautiful life today. I know what I am, I know what I suffer from, and I know that I can never forget that first step. I know that it's vital that I always remember that I'm an alcoholic, but I also know that there's a solution. I know this solution works, and I know this solution is available to literally anybody willing to do this work. I love you all. Thank you so much for having me.